What's up, family? Thank you for tuning in to the DreamNation podcast. My name is Casanova. I'll be your host, and I'm excited to be bringing to you entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and trailblazers from around the world. Stay locked in with us because we're about to go on a journey that will change your life. What's up, Dream Nation? Today we are back again with another, I'm sure is going to be phenomenal episode. And I'll tell you, the reason why I'm so excited about this, and you could probably hear it in my voice, is because I feel like that I'm talking to family. And when I say that, it's just because when you have someone that you've been able to meet in such a short amount of time, but when you read their backstory, you just understand that there's a reason why you were connected with this person. Have you ever felt that? I'm sure that I'm not the only one. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Miss Rhonda Britton to the show. Rhonda, you want to go ahead and say what's up to Dream Nation?
Oh my gosh. Hello, Dream Nation. I'm so excited to be here because dreaming and building a dream and having a dream is one of my favorite things in the whole world. And in order to do it, you got to be fearless.
You got to be fearless. And that's what we're going to tap into. But before we get into that, I always like to make sure that I could give the proper introduction. And I mean, just looking at your story, it's so incredible. But at the same time, how long that you've been able to be sustainable, which is what a lot of people struggle with, no matter what the industry is. So let me ask, before you being featured on NBC and Fox and Oprah and Huffington Post and everything else, right? Before the 20-year career, let's take it back to when you were just a young girl and tell me, who is Rhonda Britton?
Oh my gosh. Well, gosh, that's such a good question. Who is Rhonda Britton? I was just talking about this yesterday with my best friend. I think the thing that makes me Rhonda Britton is that I have a pure heart and I am committed to not only supporting myself and understanding how I am meant to live the life my soul intended, but helping others do it as well. So, I love the phrase, live the life your soul intended, because I don't want to create a life based on my head. I want to create a life based on my heart, right? I want to create a life that is, kind of like my destiny. So what makes me Rhonda Britton is probably I kept going no matter what. No matter how dark it was, no matter how deep it was, no matter how horrific it was, I kept going. And I'd be happy to, share the worst day of my life whenever you think it's appropriate. But, I think for me, it's just that I kept going and I kept going.
Got it. I love it. And that's what we all need to hear. We all need to keep taking one step at a time. But let's talk about when you were a young girl, like what was the day in the life like of Rhonda, if you could remember back? Were you someone who was always trying new things? Did you know your path? Because now you're an incredible speaker and teacher, but when you were young, was it like, what was that like for you?
I just wanted to sing and dance. That's all I wanted to do. I thought I was going to be a famous actress. I just would put on shows for people. My mother, one of my mom's best friends, said to me years ago, she goes, your mom would always look at you as you're singing and dancing and put on a show. She'd look at you and go, she might be famous yet. So that was me. I just loved people. I went to church all the time. Church was one of my favorite places in the whole world. I would sing in choirs. I sang for shows. I had private voice lessons. And I remember I wanted to sing. And then when I was in high school, I had my first, acting thing, right? My first acting show. And my acting coach came up to me. And I grew up in a little tiny town. And there was just 100 people per class in the middle of nowhere. And my acting coach came up to me and said, you could be an actress. It took me years to actually fulfill that dream because I was so petrified of it, which is a whole story in itself. But I think me growing up is I just wanted to express myself. And it's my definition of success, actually, is to have full self-expression. If you're not expressing yourself fully, then you are not successful in being you.
Wow. And I love that you said that. And I will want to tap into, first off, let's tap into that. Why were you so afraid of it, in the beginning? Because I feel like a lot of people, they are dealing with that right now. Why do you think you were so afraid of it?
I was taught growing up that you have to be quiet, even though I was singing and dancing, that was appropriate because I was putting on a show. But otherwise, nobody wanted to hear my feelings. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't, talk about dreams. There was no dreaming in my family. That was not the conversation we had. My father, my mother, they weren't, dreamers per se. And even just the culture I lived in, in Upper Michigan, that's just not what people do. They don't go and have a dream, they just work, and then they just go home, and then they have dinner, and then they work. So I don't even think, besides like wanting to sing and dance, I didn't know how to actualize a dream. I didn't know how to put that in motion, but I also thought that was like for somebody else and not me, even though it was kind of pulling me still. Like I went to college and I minored in theater. Like, God forbid I major in theater, right? I got a minor in it, right? And then I eventually, through a course of events, moved to Los Angeles to start acting, but it took me 2 years. I was paralyzed. I literally was waitressing. I didn't know what to do, even though in LA, back then there were, backstage and all these things like, here's what you do. But I was petrified to pick up that thing and go to an audition. I didn't know what I was doing. I was completely lost. And I didn't know how to get help. Like, I didn't know how to ask. I went through high school and college, get this, never asking a question. Because how I was raised is asking a question is bad, you're dumb, you're this. So you have to figure it out on your own. The only way it counts, is how I grew up, the only way it counts is you have to figure it out by yourself. So here I am in Los Angeles wanting to be an actress. And for 2 years, literally 2 years, waitressing, sitting in my little studio apartment, frozen. And it wasn't until I met somebody where I was waitressing, my new waitressing place, that basically said, Rhonda, hey, this is what you do, A, B, and C. But I had no ability to ask. I had no ability to reach out. I just thought like, well, if it's going to happen, I guess it's just going to happen. I don't know. I didn't know how to connect the dots.
Wow. And so was there a lot of resentment, the fact that you decided you were going to move out, you were going to move to LA, right? And you were going to do your own thing. And just like you said, you had to minor. Was that by choice, or was it out of basically fear that someone else would basically try to tear down your dreams when you said you minored rather than majored in theater?
Oh yeah. When I minored in theater, it's like, to major in it is like a silly thing. One, I didn't know that I knew anything. And, you have to remember, I grew up in a little tiny town, and now I'm going to the University of Minnesota, which at the time was the largest enrollment school in the country. So now there are people all over, in the theater department that have been acting for decades, like years, and they're professionals and they've done shows. And it's just, I couldn't compete. When I grew up, I was a big fish in a little pond, right? There were 3 of us that are actors. So it was like, of course I'm good, right? But when you take that big fish and, in a little pond, and now you're the little fish in the big pond, it just was like, I can't compete with this. They're better than me. And I didn't have enough self-esteem. I didn't have enough self-confidence to actually believe I could do it. Now, this is the trick, is that if you would have met me, you would have thought I had confidence and self-esteem, because I was really good at hi, right? Like I was like, I belonged to a sorority, and I was like one of the leaders in the sorority. And then I was chosen to be the only woman college student on this finance committee for the entire University of Minnesota. I was the only woman and the only student, which was amazing, right? So it's kind of like, I got these accolades, but not about anything that I really wanted. And so on the outside, it looked like I had it together. But on the inside, I did not have it together at all. And because that was a break, right? There was the outside and the inside were so mismatched. I couldn't ask for help. I couldn't reach out. I couldn't go and take action on the things I wanted to, because you already thought I was successful. You already thought I had it together. So I didn't know how to do that. And it's actually one of the reasons I do what I do today, because, when I first started, recovering from the worst day of my life, I really realized that I didn't know how to do the very, like when you read a book, it says, love yourself. It's like, how do you love yourself if you don't love yourself? Like
Right.
People just say like, oh, just do it. It's like, just do it. What are you talking about? What do you mean just do it? What do you mean love yourself? What do you mean get confidence? I tell me exactly what to do. And nobody really would tell me what to do. They would give me like, hey, do this. But it wasn't literally step by step, like, okay, Rhonda, now this is like, do this, right? Like, and so I'm dedicated to practical application to help people move forward, because I needed that. I don't need, again, of course I want to inspire.
You didn't need the motivation, but you needed the tactical steps to get from point A to point Z.
And not only tactical, but also just how do you go from being afraid to ask a question, to have the courage to ask a question. So not only did I need tactical, I needed skills, I needed tools, and I needed to start having a different image of myself.
Wow.
I remember one of the biggest changes in my life was when I had the realization that what if everybody was right about me and I was wrong about me?
Wow.
What if everybody else is right? Because they'd be like, oh, Rhonda, you're great at this. Or Rhonda, you're good at this. Rhonda, yeah. And they would put praise on me. And I'd be like, you don't know me. You don't know what I'm really like inside. Right. And I remember the day is crystal clear. And I was like, what if they're right and I'm wrong? Like, what if I lived inside my compliments? What if I lived inside the things that people said about me? What if I lived in my best press, so to speak, right? And that was mind-blowing to me that they could be right and I could be wrong, because I'd been told my whole life and convinced myself that, I was this way. This is just who I was. I looked good on the outside, but I couldn't make anything happen on the inside.
So that's so powerful that you said you didn't believe enough in yourself. And the fact that you were saying, wow, how could someone else have more belief in me? And that's what I think that we experience a lot of the times. Talk to me about, was there ever a moment that started all of this negative self-talk or belief for you? Like, was there one day or one event that happened that maybe allowed you to start thinking that the negativity was the right way? Like, was there ever that one point?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll just tell you about the worst day of my life, because the worst day of my life basically proved all my negative self-talk was true. And that I was in a trap that I didn't know how to get out of until, of course, many years later. So this is the worst day of my life. And, everyone's got one, and this is mine. And mine was when I was 14 years old. And like I said, I grew up in a little tiny town in Upper Michigan, 365 inches of snow a year, 2 restaurants, the fancy Douglas house and big boy. And my father and mother had just separated, and my father was coming over to take us out to Sunday brunch on Father's Day. And I don't know how you grew up, but we have 3 kids, 2 adults, 5 people. We never went out to eat. Like, that was way too much money. So the fact that he was coming over to take us to the fancy Douglas House buffet for Father's Day was like a miracle, right? And I knew it was only because he was trying to win my mom back, right? So we're getting all dressed up. My mom's putting on her blue eyeshadow, got, fancy bouffant hairdo, her beehive. I've got a brand new dress she sewed me. My mother made all my clothes. And my sisters are fighting it out in the bathroom. My 2 sisters, we have one little bathroom. We have 850 square foot house. And my dad walks in, come on, because that's what dads do. And me and my mom start walking out with my dad. My 2 sisters still in the bathroom fighting it out. And dad, it starts sprinkling. And so my dad says he's got to get his coat from the car. And as he opens up the trunk of his car, I notice that he does not grab a coat, but he grabs a gun. And he starts yelling at my mother, "You made me do this. You made me do this." And he fires. Now I start screaming, "Dad, what are you doing? Stop. What are you doing, Dad?" And he cocks the gun, points it at me. And I absolutely 100% believed I was next. He blinked, I blinked. We I basically held my breath waiting to die. And my mother, who already had 1 bullet in her, sees that gun in my face and screams, "No, don't." And my father, realizing my mother's still alive, takes that bullet intended for me and shoots my mother a second time. And that bullet goes through her abdomen, goes out her back, lands in the car horn. And for the next 20 minutes, all I hear is, and then my father takes the gun, cocks it again, gets down on his knees, puts the gun to his head and fires. So in a matter of 2 minutes, I am the sole witness of watching my father murder my mother and commit suicide. Now, I don't know how other people responded, but this is how I responded. It's my fault, because I was the only one physically out there. I was the only one physically out there that could have stopped it. And I did nothing heroic. I didn't grab the gun. I didn't kick my father in the shins. I didn't even jump in front of my mother. I didn't jump in front of my mother. And that moment, when you watch your mother die and you believe it's your fault, then happiness is off the table. You don't get to be happy ever again.
Right.
Don't get to be happy. I was 14.
Wow.
And, basically that day, I like to say I split in 2. It's really where I split in 2, because, on the outside, still went finished high school, got straight A's, got a college scholarship. No, I'm fine. And internally, I had this horrific feeling, one of guilt and shame, of course, that I was the only survivor, but also just that I really did believe that there was something wrong with me. And growing up with a father who ends up killing your mom and then kills himself, you also go, okay, well, his blood runs through my veins. What am I capable of? So I was on one hand afraid of myself. I was on one hand, I just thought there must be something seriously wrong with me. Right. And so I just basically split in two, went to high school. Like I said, thought, just pretended my way through it. Went to college. Finally, nobody knew my story, thought I could hide it, thought nobody knows it, right? Nobody knows my story. I'll be a different person. But when you start stuffing it so deep down and then you find alcohol, well, let's just say alcohol, I had nightmares every night for decades. My father shooting me every night in my dreams. So alcohol became a way that I could sleep, avoid, deny. So I started drinking.
It was your coping mechanism.
It was one of my coping mechanisms and one that I enjoyed, right? But the problem is I wasn't a fun drunk. I was all my feelings of rage came out, right?
Got it.
So here I am drinking and I end up getting 3 DUIs, end up trying to kill myself 3 times. And on my 3rd suicide attempt, I realized I'm not very good at killing myself. And I better figure out another way. Now I want to say something. During those years of me, alcohol and DUIs and suicide, I read my first self-help book when I was 12. And I was a God girl ever since I was little. Like, here I'd be reading the Bible, checking off like how many verses I read. So during that whole time, I went to therapy, workshops, read book. I mean, I was a voracious reader and, went everywhere I could to get help. And it was all nice. It was inspiring. It was motivating. It was lovely, but it didn't, it was good. It was like filling my toolbox up, but it never took away the feeling that there was something wrong with me. So during that 3rd suicide, after I got home from that 3rd suicide attempt, and by the way, they put you in a psychiatric ward to evaluate if you're crazy when you try to kill yourself 3 times, and they deemed me not crazy. I remember going home and went I have tried everything. I've gone to therapy, I've workshops, books, I've done everything I can. I've inner child work, rebirthing, energy work, shamanism, you name it. And I remember sitting down, I'll never forget it. I was sitting on the floor of my little studio apartment with my back to the wall and saying to myself, if I'm not going to die, I better figure out how to live because I can't keep living like this.
Wow.
So that moment I said to myself, I have to start over. I have to start at the beginning. And what do they do in kindergarten? And so I went and got gold stars on a calendar and still have this calendar, by the way, got gold stars on a calendar. And I said to myself, Rhonda, you have to find out if you're worth saving. Huh. And so what I did every day for 30 days is I gave myself a gold star for any time that I did anything good. And I mean, the things that I wrote on my calendar are like, got angry, but didn't break anything, felt hurt, but didn't, attack, these were just like basic little things. There was nothing amazing on there, right? Per se, in the big scheme of things. But all those little things at the end of the month, I had a calendar filled with stars. And I thought, okay, I'm worth saving. And so then I started creating exercises for myself because everything that I had tried, again, inspired me and motivated me, but it didn't do like what I said earlier. It didn't tell me how to go from A to A.1 to A.2, right? To B, to
right.
Really get me out of it. And so I made up exercises for myself. And then people started noticing. And I was at church one day and this couple chased me out and said, what are you doing? There's something different about you. And I want to say this is that when I was creating these exercises, I was embarrassed because, my thought was therapy isn't working for me. That's how screwed up I am. So I was embarrassed by these exercises. I wasn't proud to create these. I was like, oh, I must be really screwed up. So when this couple followed me out and were like, what are you doing? I was like, nothing. I'm not doing nothing, right? I'm not nothing at all. Like, what are you talking about? And they're like, no, Rhonda, there's something different about you. And I'm like, what? And like kind of getting caught with my hand in the cookie jar. And they basically like just kept on me until I told them what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm making up exercises. They said, oh, well, we want one. I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? So I give them one. And the next week they come back to me and say, it's working. Can we have another one? I'm like, what? And that was the first moment I thought maybe this wasn't just for me. It took me many years after to actually start doing it, but it was the first moment when I went, oh, wow. You mean there are other people that could use this? It was mind-blowing to me that anybody could use the work that I created for myself to save my life.
Wow. So there's so much power in that. And I love the fact that you were so transparent about every single emotion. Thank you for that. One thing that comes to my mind is during this time where you're at your darkest moment, where are your sisters? And did it feel like that you were alone? Because obviously they both still lost parents as well. Was there no type of bond or synergy that you all brought together? Or did it feel like no, because you guys didn't actually witness it like me, even you don't understand me?
There was a little bit of that at the end, like you didn't witness it. And we also scattered. So, my parents died when I was 14. My little sister was 13. My older sister had just turned 18. And, we stayed living in that house. They died in the driveway. So we stayed living in that house for the next 2 years. And then when I was a senior in high school.
Who came? Did you have because I'm just kind of.
Nope. Nobody came. Nobody came and no relatives came.
So who was the responsible party? The 18?
My older sister, who was 18 years old.
Wow. Okay.
And so my older sister, Cindy, and what I'm saying to you, I've said to her, this is not, like my sister 18, she had gotten C's and D's in school, drank, smoked. I was a straight A student, didn't drink or smoke. So when my parents died, started raising myself because I can't go to my sister. I'm not going to take advice from her. Right. And I remember her telling me, trying to, give me parental advice. I'd be like, let's see. You drink and smoke. Let's see. You get D's and I get straight A's and I don't drink and smoke. I think I will listen to myself. Right. So, and then my relatives literally scattered. I mean, this is how crazy it was. I mean, which makes me, it's just shocking to me thinking about it now. But even one of my uncles, and my mother had 11 brothers and sisters, and my dad had, 5 brothers and sisters. And nobody came, nobody helped, and nobody gave us money, nobody fed us, nobody came over, nothing. And this is kind of like how it is. One of my uncles, a couple years ago when I'm visiting him, goes, where did you girls live after that? And I go, we lived in the same house, Uncle. And he's like, well, I drove by once. And I'm like, great, thanks.
Right.
But so nobody helped us. And so by the time I was 17, I had my own apartment. My sisters and I had kind of scattered, one sister went one place, one sister went another. My little sister, Linda, was loved by my father and adored by my father. So my sister's like, la, 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 don't talk about dad. She wanted to keep that love bond. My older sister was in her own survival mode. So, I think we were all on our own. We were all trying to make it on our own. So, I mean, we talked to each other, but it wasn't like we were sharing things or anything like that,
Yeah, no. And I can imagine, so that brings up, I guess that explains it when I was thinking in the beginning where you said, hey, I grew up in this small town. And then all of a sudden I just make this huge jump and I go to LA. Right. And so it's like, okay, well, that's, kind of why, because you were already from 17 on your own and trying to figure it all out. So I love the fact
I was going to say, I got to LA only because of one reason. I'm sitting in, taking minor theater, right? And wanting to be an actress, but not knowing how to do it. And I'm looking for a roommate. So God is good to me. I'm looking for a roommate, and the roommate comes in as I'm interviewing roommates, and I go, oh, where are you from? Los Angeles. And she's an actress. And I'm like,
right. It's
nice. What are you kidding? And she goes, I'm living here for a year. My brother is dying. And when he passes, I'm going to go back to LA. And I'm like this, must have roommate.
Right. Take me with you.
Right. So she moved in. We were meant to leave on June 15th the next year. Her brother had not passed. She goes, Rhonda, we have to wait. And so July 15th comes and her brother hasn't passed. She goes, oh, I have to wait. And I looked at her because I had a boyfriend and he was I was going to get married. I said, if I do not leave right this minute,
I'm never
leaving. I'm never leaving. I get that you can't go, but I have to go because I am going to be in Minneapolis, Minnesota, married to my college boyfriend, and it'll be a nice life, but it won't be my life. And I had to leave. So I actually drove out to LA, not knowing one human being, not knowing a soul, with no support. And, with $200 in my pocket that I'd saved up. And I got to LA and, somehow made it through.
Wow. And so the reason why I love the fact that you told that last part especially is because you could have, just like you said, I would have been living a nice life, but it would not have been my life. No. And I feel like that's what so many people do. They settle, even though knowing that, our most valuable asset on this planet is our time. And it's a short amount of time because we never know when the end of our rope's coming. And so the fact that you said, listen, I got to go. Well, first off, I wondered, your boyfriend at the time, did he go with you or did he just allow you to leave?
No, he just was like, no, we'd had some problems, but he was courting me back and I knew he was going to ask me to marry him because we'd been together for a few years. And again, it would have been a nice life. He was his father owned like 5 jewelry stores. I could have been a jeweler's wife. They looked lovely. I could have played golf and just gone to the country clubs and been, a philanthropist, right? And again, from a little town from Hancock, Michigan, that would have been an amazing leap, right? But I knew that I would die. I knew that I would die if I lived there. So, I mean.
And you mean internally? Like your soul would die.
I would die. My soul would die. And so I literally, when we said we're going to leave July 15th, I literally got in my car without her and drove. Okay. And I listened to, you're going to love this. I listened to, oh my God, what's the song? No, yeah, I love that. New Attitude.
Okay, yeah.
Song, New Attitude?
Yeah.
I listened to it nonstop from Minneapolis, Minnesota to Los Angeles, California, on repeat. And back then you had to have cassettes, right? Cassettes and 8-tracks, right? But I would just play it over and over again because I knew if I did not change who I was on that car ride, I was screwed. And then when I got to LA, it was kind of like, phew, I made it here. And then I froze for 2 years, right?
Yeah. Now, what do I do? Now, I love it that you told that story, and that's a great backstory, and it helps to segue into what I'm going to ask now, which is, how did you overcome the self-talk and the fear? Because so many people, they have that right now. It's in a world where right now, depending on when you're listening to this, right, we're in a pandemic, right? And we don't know how long it will go on. And even before this, people had fear. Fear is the number one reason stopping people from going after their dreams or their business goals or whatever else. And so for you being in a brand new city, brand new state with a brand new career and a brand new situation, what is the one thing that helps you to start to live fearlessly? Was it a person? Was it a mentor?
I was going to say it was a series of events. I think the first thing, people ask me like, what are the most important days of your life? Well, obviously my parents dying is the most important day of my life. But my most important day of changing my life was the first big thing that I did was get sober. Without my sobriety, without getting sober, I would not be who I am. I would not be here today. The next most important thing was I finally forgave my father and mother and finally myself. So, the day they died, at the time I was going to be a minister. I just announced to my family 6 months before that I was going to be a minister. So the day my parents died, I forgave my father and forgave my mother immediately. Like I was like, forgive, but you think you forgive, but you don't really forgive. And forgiveness is a multi-layered process. And so when I really, truly forgave my father, the nightmares stopped, and those nightmares haunted me every night. Every night my father was chasing me in my dreams and shooting at me, and I had bullets in my, literally bullets in me every morning. So, stopping those dreams and forgiving my father, again, another huge moment. And then the other moment was when I really...
and I'm so sorry, but yeah, I want to tap into that so we don't forget about it, because there's a lot, we hear that all the time, right? Forgiveness. Forgive that person because they actually made you who you are. If that didn't happen, you wouldn't be the character that you are today, good, bad, whatever, right? But you said that it's a multi-layered process. You can't just say, oh, I forgive.
Yeah,
How does someone break down that? How do they even understand what the layers are so they could start to be able to truly forgive?
Yeah, I love this topic. Thank you so much for asking me about this, because I actually created an exercise that is the thing that got me through. And again, I'm not Rhonda Britton yet, i.e. master coach, Emmy Award winner, all those things yet, right? I'm just Rhonda sitting on the floor of my studio apartment, struggling and trying to survive. And I remember people would be like, write a forgiveness letter. And I'm like, okay, well, that wasn't helpful. It's nice, but it's not helpful. And so I made up an exercise. I always say God gave it to me. Like made up an exercise, and that exercise helped me to get to the place that I was finally able to forgive my father. And I have a fantastic story about the kind of the day that I forgave him. But going back to the multi-layer, so there's so much I can say about this. I like to say that let's think of us as a human being, right? Let's think of us, we have two arms, we have two legs, right? We have a heart. And I always like to say that people think that they have forgiven, and they're always shocked that, 10 years later, 5 years later, that feeling of rage comes up again, or the feeling of disappointment or heartbreak comes up again. Well, this is how I like to think of it. You can only forgive based on your level of awareness. So the day my parents died, here I am, a Bible God girl, going to be a minister. Of course I'm going to forgive. I mean, of course, right? That is what I was made to do. So, that day the minister came over and, because they're going to do the burial and everything. And they're asking us, hey, they didn't even I don't even think they asked us how we were doing, to be honest. But it's like, I forgave. Like I said, yeah, I've forgiven him. Yes, I went skating the night they died. And my friends were all coming to skating, and I went skating. So every Sunday I went skating, and now I go skating because I'm like, I have to do something normal. All my friends are coming, crying, bawling, and like, and I'm like this, oh no, I'm fine. I've forgiven, right? So I forgave at my level of awareness. When I turned 20, 21, and I started going to another, I forgave at like a little bit more, right? And then as I've grown and shifted, as I become more awake and more aware, I like to say there's pockets of, feelings and emotions hidden inside of us that we don't even see or have access to because we're not awake enough to see them. But when we wake up, different parts of us kind of like blossom and open and go, okay, now you're ready to heal this part of the story. Now you're ready to heal this. So it's not that you're screwed up or bad, that these things kind of rotate through your life. It's actually validation and affirmation that you're growing, because that wouldn't come up if you didn't.
Right.
So I think if people can get their head around that, they will no longer beat themselves up and be like, I can't believe this is happening to me again. Why is my father coming up? It's like, yeah, it only proves that you're growing. Right.
And I love that you said that, but let me ask you this, because what I heard is you said, when I turned 20 to 21, obviously that is, 5, 6 years later, right? 6, 7 years later. How much of this is just, you have to be patient with time? Because for a lot of people, can this happen? Can anyone uncover these additional pockets within the next 3 months? Or is it like, listen, you just have to acknowledge with yourself, it is going to take time?
I think there's two things. Yes to that. And there's a way to support yourself, right? So, I'm talking to a private client yesterday, and she wants to build a relationship with her mother, who's very difficult to talk to, et cetera, et cetera. And we talk about how she needs to move through forgiveness before she can actually heal that relationship, because she's still going to get on the phone and be angry with her, right? She has to get on the other side in order to actually love somebody who betrayed her or hurt her, right? She has to go through the healing process. So the exercise that I created can help kind of jumpstart that, right? And you can't, every time I forgave, I thought I forgave, right? So when people say to me, oh, this is, somebody said to me the other day, oh, I know I'm on the deepest layer now. I'm at the core of my being. It's like, maybe not, right? Right. Like, okay, you can say that to yourself if it makes you feel okay. But I don't know about that, because aren't you going to keep growing? Aren't you going to keep exposing parts of yourself and being willing to be more vulnerable and more courageous and more, risk-taking? Because that's going to expose parts of you that you don't even know exist. Right. So, on one hand, every time you forgive, you think you're done. You're like, well, done. Right. But it's just the awareness of knowing, well, I'm done for now at this level of awakening, like this level of growth where I am right now. And the exercise I created, I'm happy to share, really propelled me forward in order to forgive my father. And then, of course, to forgive my mother. Because, people think like, oh, why'd you have to forgive your mother? She was murdered. It's like, nah, you have to forgive the martyr. Yeah, I got to take mother off the pedestal and quit making her the victim and actually have her part of the play, right?
Right.
And then I had to forgive myself for not doing anything because I was the last one I could forgive. My father was actually the easiest person to forgive. And then my mother was the second hardest. And then I was, of course, the hardest of all.
Hey, what's up, Dream Builder? Have you been getting any value out of this episode? Would you like to get more exclusive content just like this delivered right to your inbox? If so, head on over to DreamNationPodcast.com and you can sign up for the email list, and that will give you access to exclusive content and more interviews just like this that's going to be delivered only to our tribe. So head on over to DreamNationPodcast.com. Let's get back to it. And so for that exercise, we're actually going to see, for anybody that's listening right now, we're going to see if we can give it in the show notes. So we're going to see if we can get something. So then you'll be able to go to it. We'll have a link to that exercise that you'll be able to go and have access to. And I'm sure if you're someone who's dealing with a problem of forgiveness right now, this can be just tremendous for you. And I'm excited to see it as well. One thing that I wanted to ask you about is, as you started to, was there one little win that allowed you to say, listen, I am where I'm supposed to be and I am destined for greatness, right? Like, you've been featured on Oprah and all these other things. Was it like the moment that someone from Oprah heard your story, or New York Times or whatever else it was, right? And then all of a sudden you went on there, you told your story to the best of what you could, and the world loved it, and so much feedback came back of, oh my God, this is how much you've helped me. Was there one time like that you said, listen, it's time to embrace it because I am where I'm supposed to be?
Yes, there was a moment. And it definitely was, like I mentioned before, like, I'm a God girl. And after my parents died, I couldn't use the word God for 20 years. Like, if you said the word God to me, I'd be like, light, universe, source, don't say the word God. Because, I was going to be a minister, and I really believe that they died because of me, because this is a test from God to see how faithful I am, right? So I was really like, God, thank you so much, but these tests are too big. I'm not talking to you, right? So here I am. I'm living in Los Angeles. I'm actually have left acting and working, doing some public relations. And one of my clients is one of the very first life coaches, because there's, there were at the time, there wasn't an industry called coaching, but he was one of the very first, and he was one of my clients. And I remember he would always tell me, Rhonda, you're going to be a better coach than me. And I'd look at him like, you are a crazy person, because remember, I've got this horrible past and I'm still screwed up. So, but he would always say to me, Rhonda, you're going to be a better coach than me. Rhonda, you're going to be a better coach than me. And two things happened kind of simultaneously. One is I got him a speaking event to speak. There's something called the Learning Annex, before, and it was an amazing place that you could go and speak. And, they would do all the enrollment. So I got him a gig there. And so he went to go speak there, and there was maybe 20, 30 people in the room. And I was there with him. It was his first time. And as he goes up, I introduce him. And as he goes up to speak, and again, this man is brilliant, beyond brilliant. As the minute he goes up to speak, he literally says one sentence and runs out of the room. And I'm like, what just happened? And I'm like, just a minute, I'll go back and say what's going on. And I follow him, and he's in the bathroom, and he has food poisoning. And he is literally like, well, let's just say it's not a pretty sight, and he's no way coming back.
Right.
And I went, okay. So I went up in front of the room and taught the class. And while I was teaching the class, and again, I'd never this is not something, I am not him, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. I'm the publicist, right?
Right.
Right. This is crazy, right? But I go up and I start talking about him and start talking about his work and start just talking about blah, blah, blah. And I realize, this is one of the little things that happen. I realize that people are more interested in hearing me talk about it than him, because he's almost too smart. Like, you know what I mean? He's so smart that sometimes you don't understand him because he's just so smart.
Feels
right?
Like he's talking over your head. Yeah.
Yeah. Where growing up in Upper Michigan and me going like, hi, Sally and Peter went to the store is really helpful. Right.
Right. Right.
Basic, right. And so my ignorance and my lack of sophistication actually supported me then. So that moment I realized was like, what? Like, what? Wow. And like basically everybody signed up for his class because of me, and it was awesome. The other thing happened is that his name is Paul. Paul and I are sitting around his house. We're brainstorming, got his whiteboard out. And again, I'm not thinking anything about me. And we're working on his business. And this is the miracle that happened in my life. So I'm just going to get a little woo-woo now for a second. So everybody who's not woo-woo, shut your ears. So I'm sitting on the couch. He's standing up on the whiteboard. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see that the world has opened up. A book comes out and basically goes, shuts and goes back up into heaven. And I'm like, what just happened? And I literally turn around, Casanova, because that can't be for me. There's nobody else in the room. I look at Paul, he's still talking. He doesn't know what happened. And I'm like, holy crapola. I run to have a meeting with my minister because thank God I had something scheduled. And I go, okay, this thing happened to me. And she says to me, well, that's your call. You've been called. And I'm like, yeah, but I haven't finished college. I left with 3 credits short. I have to go finish my 3 credits. I have to go get my master's. I have to get a PhD and I have to write a book. And maybe in 7 or 8 years, I can do this. And she just kept saying, it's your call. You've gotten called. Like you need to, like it's time. And she goes, I just looked at her, I go, I have nothing. Like I've got nothing, right? Like like you don't understand, right? Like, and she goes, Rhonda, you are ready. If you got the call, it means you're ready. And I'm like, what? So I wrestle with this concept and I go to Paul, who's my, who's my client.
Yeah.
And it took me about 6 months to finally go, well, maybe I could have a client. So I basically became his first coaching student, trained coach, and started having sessions and would have a session and run to him and be like, what do I do now? And then I'd run back and then I'd run back to him. And, for 6 months, I didn't trust myself, didn't know what I was doing. And after about 6 months, I started trusting myself because I had done a tremendous amount of work on myself. I'd already been creating exercises myself for years.
Yeah. So him and other people.
So I'd already done all this stuff, but I didn't know that I could apply it to other people. And I didn't understand that I knew this stuff. I didn't believe I had anything. I didn't believe I had anything good to give because all I did was look at my past, but also I looked at how my life wasn't what I thought it should be. So I compared myself to a fantasy version of myself, right? And until I reached that fantasy version, I had no right to do it. And because of my past, I had no right to do it because I didn't get my life together, right? So I kept on looking at this fantasy future, this fantasy person I thought I should be, and then the past, and both of those things said, you are not good enough right now to step out. And so for 6 months, I wrestled with that and just worked with it. And basically, I really did wrestle with it. And finally, just step by step, started coming out and going, well, what if this is what I'm meant to do? And maybe it doesn't matter if I'm any good at it in the beginning. What if my past doesn't matter? And what if my fantasy person, what if that never happens? Right. So I just started, bit by bit. And then, momentum, as is a wonderful thing because as I started doing it, I started building momentum. And then within like a year, I had my own practice. Within 2 years, I was, speaking. Within 3 years, I was, having workshops. After 4 years, people asked me for a book. 5 years, I'd written a book. 6 years, I was on a tour. 6th year, I started, I was on my first television show, right? I was the first one on TV in the world. But it was all because I was completely devoted. And I knew that I was really on a mission. It was not about me. People always ask me, how did you be so successful so fast? I said, I put my blinders on. I didn't give a shit about what anybody else was doing, excuse my language. And I just knew that I had to do what I had to do. Is what I was called to do, I had to do. And so I put my blinders on and just did the work. Didn't care about my self-esteem anymore. Didn't care if I had low self-esteem. Didn't care about my confidence. Could give a crap about that. I had work to do, and the work would hone me, and make me who I was meant to be. But I had to do the work, and that's what saved me.
Got it. Wow. There's so much there. And the biggest thing that I love that you said was I put on my blinders, because in the world that we're living in today, that's very, very hard to do because social media is hitting you, right? The TV's hitting you. Everyone has a cell phone in their hand, and there's some type of an app that has some type of ads on it that, in the sense, they want to solve a problem for you, but how do you solve a problem first? Just like you said, you had to become aware. So for so many people, they only know from their level of awareness. So for you as a business owner who's trying to advertise, you first have to let someone know that there is a problem. So from the consumer side, you're first seeing that problem and you maybe don't have that mindset strength, right? To say, listen, I'm not going to be degraded by this, but I'm still going to keep on my blinders because I know that my time is coming if I could just keep focused on it. But I feel like that there's so much there that a lot of people can't focus. How do you even stay focused now in today's world of not chasing a shiny object and stay in your course?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly, I think, the problem that most entrepreneurs are dealing with right now, because there's just too much information. I started my business when I had email and I had my first website, 2 years later, but I was one of the first adopters of websites and email. And the first time that I did email, I would give a talk to a community college or give a talk to the Lions Club. And I would talk anywhere. I didn't care where I talked. I would talk for free for 2 years. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to talk for free, right? They have this vision in their mind that, well, I should be paid. It's like, well, I talked for 2 years for free. And I started making little products, like a cassette tape here and a little book here. And I printed it. And I was making $20,000 a month speaking for free. And so, people are so afraid.
And so unpack that, because people want to know now, if I'm listening to that and I'm like, well, how did you make $20,000 a month if you're speaking for free? What did that look like?
Yeah. So the first year that I was in business, like I said, the first 6 months I was in business, I had 2 clients and I charged $25 and I drove to them, and I live in Los Angeles. So, I had no money. Right. And I could not get anybody else to hire me those 6 months. It was like, what, why is this not working? Right. Mm-hmm. And then the 6-month mark, I kind of figured it out. Like I started talking to people differently. And within days, I had 20 clients. And it changed, obviously, everything for me, because now I have 20 clients, I have a full practice. And then, like I said, I was doing one-on-ones, and one of my clients said, hey, could you teach me, could you come and talk to my students and, blah, blah. So it happened piecemeal by piecemeal. So I think the problem with today is that we see everybody's end result and we go, well, I have to reach that level, instead of recognizing that, no, it really is stepping stones. So my first thing was private coaching. That's all I cared about. I wasn't going to speak or train. That wasn't even in my bandwidth, right? It was just building my one-on-one coaching practice. And then from my one-on-one coaching practice, somebody from the outside came to me and said, hey, will you come and teach my employees? And I didn't think about teaching workshops, but then I went and did that. And I was like, oh, I like this. And then from there, it led to speaking, right? It led to each thing unfolded. I think everybody's now trying to reach, get the, gold ribbon, get the prize right when they start. And they're comparing themselves to somebody like me who's been in business 25 years. Right. And it's like, no, that's not how this goes down. It took me 6 months to build a full-time practice. It took me 2 years to teach my first workshop. It took me 3 years to speak. And speaking of speaking, so what I used to do, and you can do this easily now, I did it with cassette recorders. Every time I spoke for free, I would record myself. I would bring all my gadgets with me. And back then it was all these gadgets. Now it's just a cell phone, and a mic. That's all you need, right?
Right.
And I would record myself. And whenever there was a really good talk, I would label it something, expectations. And I would write Rhonda Britton live, never edit it, because that would cost money. And I would make cassette tapes and I would put the label Rhonda Britton live. So they weren't expecting editing. And then I would go to the next event and sell that cassette tape. And then I kept on having good talk. So by the end, before I got my book deal, I had 4 cassette series. I had 2 printed books that I created. And then I created packages. So I knew that if I was speaking to 100 people, I knew I was going to sell 30% of the room. I knew I was going to make, $3,000 to $5,000. I knew it.
Right.
So, so I would come in, and again, people aren't willing to do this because they compare themselves to, the big people out there that are, they compare themselves to Tony Robbins, right? Instead, I am here with my little cart, bringing in my books and bringing in my cassettes, and I set up my table, right? And I have my little contest about a private session and get everyone's business cards. And when I was teaching workshops, the number one thing that built my business was flyers. I put flyers everywhere, right? But everybody's trying to, kind of get ahead of it, right? Like, and again, not that we don't want to use Zoom and not that we don't want to use technology, but we don't want to let technology decide our business. Again, technology's here to be an asset, but it doesn't have to. There's lots of ways to build a business now without using technology at all. So it's kind of like, that's how I did it. And then I would, and I spoke everywhere. I mean, I would speak 3 to 5 times a week. I lived in Los Angeles, so I would go all the way to Santa Barbara, 2 hours north. I'd go to San Diego, 2 hours south. I didn't care who you were. I was speaking. I spoke to, like I said, chambers of commerce, Lions clubs, community colleges. I didn't care. You ask me, I'm there.
Was it just sharing your story? Because people want to know, okay, how are you speaking? Was it just sharing your story, or were you sharing, a actual formula of how someone else, like what was it that you were speaking about when you first started out?
When I first started out, by this time, I had started developing Fearless Living. So I had started unpacking all the exercises I'd done for myself. And that's what I was, training people how to do. I had developed something called the wheel. So my methodology, one of the things that you said earlier, just to go back for a second, is you said, people aren't aware of their problem. And a lot of my marketing and a lot of things that I do are just helping people understand they have fear, because most people, like me included, I didn't think I had any fear when I was
like living in denial.
Well, it just fear. People don't, like, I grew up, we didn't talk about fear. We never said I'm afraid or I'm scared, because that was weak.
Right.
So I never said I'm afraid or I'm scared. So I am the one that's shocked that I'm teaching fear, and that fear has become, that's the core of everything. So one of the first things I have to do is actually just talk about fear and what is fear, and help people understand that they have fear. So I would give them a quiz at the beginning of my talk. I would give them a quiz. For the first 2 years of speaking, I never told my story, because I was like, nobody wants to hear that stupid story. Like, nobody wants to get depressed and hear that story, right? And they're going to think I'm crazy if they hear that story. So I would just talk about the tools that I used. And then by this time I had clients. So then I would tell them client stories, and I would say what I'm doing with my clients. And every time I spoke, it's like, maybe I'd get a laugh here, and I'd be like, ooh, I got a laugh there. And I started building my keynote, talk by talk, talk by talk by talk. So here I would say something, people would be like, oh, and I'd pull that out and go like, oh, that was good. And I'd use it the next time. So I didn't sit down and write my keynote. That keynote was built every time I gave a talk and something hit the audience. And now my keynote, I've had people all over the world tell me I'm one of the best speakers they've ever seen, because that keynote was built from my own guts, from my own. It wasn't a theory, right? It wasn't my head. It was my heart doing it, right? So it just evolved over time. So that's how I, gave my talks, and then I would have my little basket with me, my little cart, and and then 2 years later,
flyers.
Yeah, my flyers, my little bowl to put their business cards in to win a session with me. I carried all this crap all over the place, had it in my car all the time. And then the thing that kind of catapulted me, because you said a minute ago, did I tell my story? I had a friend of mine at the time that was a speaking coach, never used her professionally, but she said to me, you got to tell your story. And I'm like, again, nobody wants to hear that. And she bet me, right? She goes, I bet you it's going to make a difference. So I had 2 speeches back to back, wore the same outfit, gave the same speech. The only difference was I told my story, and I told it really bad. Like, I told it like this: my father murdered my mother, committed suicide. Like, that's like how I told it. Like, it was horrible, right? Literally, like, I just kind of threw it out, because I didn't know how to tell a story back then, right?
Right.
So the first time I gave the talk, I did not tell my story. Like, 3 people came up to me afterwards and asked questions, and, other people bought stuff, and it was, kind of like the normal thing. Next talk I gave, same thing, like I said, except this time I told my story really poorly and just like dumped it out. And I had a line around the block. Literally a line you couldn't see the end of. And I went, what just happened? And I realized that the secrets we keep are the stories we must tell.
Wow. I love it. To say that again, the secrets that we
keep are the stories we must tell.
Wow. And why? And why is that, do you think? Because for us, we want to protect it. We want to protect ourselves. We want to protect our emotion. Why should we tell our stories? Because this is something that I've struggled with as well. Of course, before the call, you heard my story, but for very long, and even as I told it, I shortened up in really 3 minutes, right? And because of almost like what you say now, obviously I know how to tell my story, but it's still that mindset of like, do people want to hear my story? Or is it looked at as a woe is me, and now I'm playing the victim when people already have their own problems?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People on social media, people have said to me, "Oh, you're making money on your mother's story," and it's like, okay, like that mentality tells me who you are. It has nothing about me, right? Like I tell my story because I've realized that if I don't tell my story, if I don't tell you what happened to me, you don't necessarily trust me. You don't know where I've come from. And you don't know what a miracle it is that I'm here now, right? And in that moment, you also know that you can do it too. Like anybody who hears my story is always like, oh, if you can do it, I can do it too, right? It's like, yeah, you can totally do it. And again, my story isn't something, I have a 3-minute version, I have a 20-minute version, right? Depending on how long I have in a keynote. And I tell my story, I don't start with it, because I've learned that when I start with it, people just stare at me the whole time and they're like, are you okay? So I teach for 40 minutes and 45 minutes, an hour before I ever tell my story. So they're like, oh my God, this content's so amazing. I gotta have it. And, help them understand how fear is. And then they start realizing they have fear and they're like, oh my God. And then I tell my story and then they're like, what? And telling my story healed me from a level of shame that I didn't even know I had, a level of shame and embarrassment. It freed me. It's like the story's out now. I don't have to hide anymore that my father murdered my mother. I don't have to hide anymore that I didn't save her. I don't have to hide anymore that I had 3 suicide attempts and 3 DUIs anymore. I don't have to, cover it up and pretend, right? And so I remember, that's one of the reasons I went on Oprah, by the way, is the first time I went on Oprah, I remember when I told my story to Oprah, I finally felt like the weight of the world was like, shoo, everybody knows my story. Okay, now I can get on with it, right? But our stories, the secrets we keep, I want you to think of them as like little plugs in your energy levels, in your like little things that are stopping your energy from, we're energy beings. And every secret you're afraid to tell. And again, you're not going to tell all your secrets. I have lots of secrets I don't, quote unquote, use in my stories, but I've also told them to somebody. Right? Like every secret I have, I've shared with somebody. May not be the same people, right? You can spread it around.
Right.
There are no secrets that I have just for myself anymore, right? And just think of that every time you're trying to have a secret, there's a part of you that is unexpressed. There's a part of you that is got a little plug in it. You can't use that energy. And that energy is, kind of turning inward instead of outward. So, every secret is eating you up a little bit.
I love it. I love it. Man, I've gotten so much inspiration and wisdom from this. And it's just sparked me to ask a question, which is not something that I typically ask on here, but I feel like this is appropriate. Let's say that in 15 years from now, right? If for God, God forbid that something was to happen, to where you see that you really only have about a couple days left, right, on this planet. You can't take any of your books with you. You can't take any of your recognition with you, but you're left with 3 Post-it notes. And again, I'm just making this up, but I think that you're going to give one of the best answers that I maybe have ever heard in terms of this. So you're left with 3 Post-it notes. And this is 3 wisdom quotes or, signs of wisdom that you can leave to the world to be remembered by. What are those 3 things that you're going to leave to try to make this world a better place when it's all said and done? What will people remember you for? Those 3 things.
Well, I know on the first one, I will say this, boy, 3. Okay. So the first one, I would say, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just fear. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just fear. Maybe I would leave the one that I just shared, which is the secrets that you hide are the stories you must tell. right? And then, boy, the third one coming up for me right now, this is coming through me based on the conversation we have, is like, you are worth forgiving. So yeah, I think you are worth forgiving. And because I think that's one of the hardest things people wrestle with, is they haven't forgiven themselves for what they still haven't done, even though they have a dream. They haven't forgiven themselves for having a dream and not acting on it, right? Right. So a lot of people have a dream, they're not acting on it, and they have to forgive themselves. I remember I was working with an entrepreneur, and he said to me, so I'm working with this group of entrepreneurs, and one guy stands up and is like, okay, well, I need to solve this problem. And I'm like, well, what problem? He goes, well, I make a lot of money, then I lose it. I make a lot of money, I lose it. I make a lot of money, I lose it. And he goes, and it's the same thing my grandfather did, and the same thing my father did. Make a lot of money, lose it. And I looked at him and I said, you must forgive them. And he's like, what? Because he wanted a strategy, right? He wanted me to tell him how, right? I said, you must forgive them, because you're carrying on in order to connect to your mother, your father, and your grandfather. You're holding the line, like you're doing the same thing they did. It's a way of love. Like you're loving them by doing that. You're accepting them by doing that. You're connecting, right? So you have to forgive them, and you have to decide that you are willing to break the family chain in order to set your own path. But the only way to do that is to forgive them. And he's like looking at me wanting money tips. And I go, trust me, when you forgive them, you will make money and you will keep it.
I got it. I love it. The last thing that I want to say is, someone out there right now is super inspired by you. They can't wait to reach out to you. They can't wait to connect with you. They can't wait to get mentorship and some type of wisdom and guidance from you. But they have that little voice in your head. I'm sure you know what little voice I'm talking about, but that little voice in their head tells them that maybe they're not strong enough, they're not smart enough, or they just don't even have enough resources. What's the one thing that you would say to that person to get them to just take action?
Wow, such good questions you have. If they were in front of me right now and they desperately wanted to change their life, but they had not done it yet, they've been, on hold, right? They've been quote unquote stuck, right? This is what's moving through me right now. And if you ask me tomorrow, maybe something else would move through me. But right now, what's moving through me is, it is not you. It is not you that's holding you back. It is fear. And you, my friend, must decide, is fear going to run your life, or are you going to run your life? Now, I'm going to teach you and show you and guide you and coach you to help you understand how your fear works, so you never are held back again. Because it is not your fault that your past happened. It is fear trying to keep you safe. And so I have a pathway to take you from A to A.1 to A.2 to B to D to Z, all the way across. And I'm going to take you, and I'm going to hold your hand throughout the whole thing, because I got you. And there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. It's just fear. And you get to decide, is fear going to make your next move, or are you going to make your next move? Are you going to decide, or is fear going to decide?
There you have it. I love it. I love it. And I hope that someone's listening to this right now, that they put that stamp down and they say, it's going to be me, and I'm going to decide that fear will not overtake my life. It's done it for too long. And now it's the time for me to make that decision to go after my dreams and my goals. This has been a phenomenal episode. As I said that it would be in the beginning, I had no doubt about it, just because of the energy that you brought from the moment you hopped into the room. For anybody that wants to stay connected with you, of course, I said we're going to drop the links in the show notes, so anybody will be able to download it and also be able to get more information from you. But if they just wanted to connect with you, where can they find you at?
fearlessliving.org. Just go on over to fearlessliving.org. And of course, I have, my Facebook and all my social media under Rhonda Britton, RHONDABRITTEN. But go over to fearlessliving.org and click on the link, Get Fearless. And, that's one of your first steps. You can join us. And of course, join our community over at Fearless You Facebook group. But fearlessliving.org has, everything that you need to figure out your next step, and coaches and support. And I just know that go in my YouTube channel and watch videos and get your questions answered. I mean, I'm here for you. And I've always said, no matter what your money is, no matter what your time is, Fearless Living has a way for you to start on this path, regardless of your money and your time. We have 3 things. We have masterminds. We have everything in between. So there is a way for you to move forward.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for coming on. And I can't wait to have you back. I mean, I know I'm no Oprah, but if you give us a round two, after, I know that you're releasing something like a 10-part series that you were talking about. And I don't know if you want to talk about that, or if not, people can go to Fearless, sign up for the subscriber list.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? If I can give a gift, I'd be more than happy to give a gift if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And we'll drop it in the show notes, but yeah, feel free to talk about it.
Yeah. Let me, during this time, like we said, that we're in the middle of this global pandemic, and hopefully, you're staying safe and healthy, I would love to give the gift. God downloaded me this idea of creating this 10-part series, the top 10 fears. And the one I'd love to give away is how to overcome fear of the unknown. And you can go to fearlessliving.org/gift, GIFT, and you can go grab it and you can devour it. It's a mini course. It's got a video and audio and fear buster exercise. It's got everything that you need to start moving forward and looking at the unknown, because truly, I guess this might be another post-it note, is freedom equals your capacity to live in the unknown. Freedom equals your capacity to live in the unknown. So the more that you can live in the unknown, the more risks you're going to take. People get stopped. Fear says, I don't know enough, right? I stood paralyzed in my bedroom, my little studio apartment in LA for 2 years because I didn't know. The unknown paralyzed me. And usually the unknown is what paralyzes most people on some level, right? It's that fear that we don't even know is happening. So go on over to fearlessliving.org/gift, GIFT. Download it. It's a mini course. You're going to have to put your name and email in order to get access to the course itself. And so do it. Go and get it. Start the journey. Start learning about fear and how it works in you, because you are not, there's nothing wrong with you, nothing wrong with you, nothing wrong with you. It's just fear. My father did not kill my mother because he was being fearless. My father killed my mother because he was afraid. My mother stayed with my father for 20 years that he was afraid. And fear almost killed me. So fear does not have to stop you. I know the way. Join me. Come on now.
Yeah, there you have it. Well, thank you again for coming on, and we appreciate it. We look forward to watching your success and your growth as well. Thanks again, Rhonda.
Thank you. Be fearless.
That's all we got for this episode. Thank you for sticking around. That truly means a lot to me, and hopefully that means that we delivered massive value on this one. If you haven't already, the way that you could say thank you to myself and the team is just by heading over to iTunes and leaving a review and a rating. That's what iTunes loves to see. That's how we get out there even more. And I would definitely be grateful for it. I know the team would as well. Do me a favor and head on over to DreamNationPodcast.com. That's where you're going to be able to find all of the resources that we talked about in today's episode, as well as more exclusive content. And you'll also be able to sign up to our email list where we have more exclusive content. And we always love to hear the feedback from you all, because you're our tribe. So remember, in the dream we trust, we'll see you on the flip side.